plus your commentary. Okay, so this is some more repetition here. These statements can be broken down into two parts. The observation, using the evidence to support the patterns or structure of the literary devices or theme, or in our case, literary criticisms, and then the commentary, you'll argue. So then you're saying that's the part where, in my example, Orwell is portraying the futility of one man against an entire system. Okay, we'll go through a bunch of things you don't want to do here. So you do not want to make an argument like Shakespeare's Hamlet is about a young man who seeks revenge. Yes, it is, but that doesn't say much. Okay, it's summary and it's not debatable. He clearly wants revenge, and so your essay is just proving the obvious, and we don't want that. You want to avoid summary statements and obvious observations from the text. Okay? Here's a much better one. A better thesis would be, in green here, Hamlet experiences internal conflict because he is in love with his mother. Okay? So there is our, so we've got a little bit of Electra, a little bit of Freudian stuff going on here. The opposite of the Oedipus complex is the Electra, where the son is in love with his mother. Excuse me. So anyway, this statement is debatable and controversial. We've got the observation is Hamlet's internal conflict. We've got the why, because he's in love with his mother. So the rest of the paper will attempt to show, using examples, how he's in love with his mother, why he's in love with her, and what implications there are for reading the play in this manner. So we will get to the why in that paper. Okay, these are bad thesis statements. These are not good. Okay, so I'll go through them quickly. I'll try to limit my time with them, but these are things you should not do. Anti-examples. So plot summary thesis. This poem shows the narrator comparing his lover to a summer's day. Okay, that's not a thesis. That just tells you what the poem is about. Proving the universal. Shall I compare these to a summer's day? Presents the power of love to conquer death. That is a slightly too broad. Okay, the power of love to conquer death those are extremely large ideas, and you probably want to refine those slightly if that was your working thesis. The overly general thesis. Shakespeare's sonnets reveal how narratives can last in ways that nature cannot. Okay, so if you can plug another text into your thesis, so if we could just say, John Donne's meditations reveal how narratives can last in ways that nature cannot, that seems plausible to me, and that means that's a bad thesis. It's not specific enough. Okay. Cliché. Cliché is a overly used phrase or idea that you kind of want to avoid. You want your ideas to be fresh and original, so you want to kind of avoid cliches. So shall I compare these summer's day proves the point that the pen is mightier than the sword is not a good thesis. The list thesis. I survived on the list thesis for many years in high school and university, but it is not the best way to go. So this is where you kind of outline your argument in the thesis as well. So here we have the structure, character, and dialogue in this poem show us how all humans search for knowledge. Okay, so as the note says there, nothing technically wrong with this thesis, but it's just boring. It's a good place to start. It's a good start. It's a good idea. It's just poorly executed. There needs more thinking there. Okay, and lastly, the reader response. We don't want to analyze how the text is addressed to the readers, because that's the whole point of texts, generally speaking. So it's really kind of not, excuse me, an analytical point. Okay, here's a good one dealing with Shakespeare's sonnet that we read and briefly analyzed. And it says, in the poem, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shakespeare uses images and the structure of the sonnet to convey how the power of human narrative asserts its dominance over nature. Okay? Much better. We've taken parts and bits of those bad ones and Frankenstein them into a good thesis here. So, it has the observation, the use of images, and the structure, and it has the commentary, which is the power of narrative over nature. Okay? Now, to get to a more relevant example, dealing with 1984, we have an observation, and this is something I put together last year, 2 years ago. But anyway, our observation about 1984, for our purposes here, is that Winston and Julia struggle against society to express their individuality. So that is something that I observed in the book. Winston and Julia don't quite know how to express themselves, and they struggle against themselves and society to express their individuality. Okay, so that's our observation. Our commentary is that Orwell suggests the power of individuality and id is not enough to overcome a well-organized totalitarian society and superego. Okay, so we're going to use some three-part personality, some psychological criticism in there to back up our observation about them struggling to express their individuality. And our commentary is that Orwell is using it to make a point about totalitarian governments, in that, one or two people expressing their individuality is not sufficient to overcome a totalitarian government that is just laced with superego all over the place. Okay, so that's our commentary. So if we can take those two ideas and put them into a nice, tidy statement, it would read something like this. Winston and Julia's nascent ids are inadequate against the overdeveloped superegos of the citizens of Oceania, demonstrating the futility of the individual versus the state, period. Okay? So I'm making an argument there that Winston and Julia have nascent, sort of developing ids. Remember, id is responsible for, id is responsible for impulses and, biological needs and stuff. And the whole novel is about how the government sort of deprives citizens of their id's ability to function. And really the only two characters that we see in the novel that have much of an id are Winston and Julia. Okay? So that's an example of a good thesis statement for 1984. Lastly, everything in the paper must relate to the thesis. So therefore, we've observed that the Winston and Julia have developing ids, nascent ids. So we are going to be needing to prove that in our thesis, in the rest of our essay. Okay? So we want to prove that and then link it back to the commentary about society. So it's all related, which I'm sure you already know by now. So the second and third points there, you must be selective. That is probably not so much of a problem. I don't think I've never really been handed in an essay that was too long, or very, very rarely anyway. So anyway, you need to stick to your observation and commentary when picking your evidence that you're going to use, essentially. Okay? Excuse me. Thesis ideas. I'm just going to rip through these here. You can pause them you can pause this video. This is going to take forever, sorry. You can pause this video and make note of these if you want. These are just sort of ideas to get you thinking, and get you thinking about different literary criticisms, as well as getting you thinking about the novel. Okay, so those are all there. You can pause and read. And then here's the bibliography for this slideshow, where the ideas of the double-barreled thesis, etc., came from. Okay. I'll put this up on Slack as soon as it's uploaded, and let me know if you have any questions.